But basically, these firms are in the what I call the kind of Fordist model of production. They make massive amounts of cloth. They make it as fast as they can. And then about 20% of their manpower is involved in fixing and repairing at the end. And part of the intervention is trying to move them slightly more towards a more modern manufacturing process of if you find a defect, fix it on the spot so it doesn't permeate. And a second issue is around decentralization of power within firms. John's also, as we discussed earlier, has also been involved quite heavily in theories on organization of the firm. And what's one of the things that was less obvious to us and just turned out as we ran the experiment is better management practices have led to pretty heavy decentralization within firms. And again, talking to Bob on this, I guess my interpretation of it and what we see in the ground is the better management practices improved informational flow within the firm. So the owners have felt more relaxed about letting plant managers take decisions, in part because the owners know what's going on, in part because they can spot theft. And then finally, there's been a big increase in computerization. So basically, as you've needed to collect and process data more, you've used more computers. So as backdrop, what do these places look like? Here's a picture of one of the factories. I put these up to give you an idea. These are large factories. Typically, this is one building. You can see it's in a gated compound with several floors. There are typically 2 buildings per factory. Most firms, the medium firm has 2 factories and a head office in downtown Mumbai. So I put this up to kind of highlight these are complicated organizations. My sense in terms of manpower and complexity, there may be a similar size to something like the GSB. I don't quite know how many employees the GSB has, but they're big. They operate 24 hours a day. There's no way you can run them in an ad hoc manner. Here's a second plant. Again, you can see a large complicated facility. Here's the first stage of the production process. Coming back to Paul's talking about CAD/CAM in terms of CAD/CAM being an old technology. You can see some of this stuff looks like it's left over from Imperial India. I think there's some pretty old equipment lying around. This is the first stage of making fabric. So when you make fabric, what happens first is you get all these spools of yarn. So the input to this is yarn thread. Upstream, there's a separate industry called spinning, which takes kind of bundles of cotton and spins it into yarn. And this machine rotates at incredibly high speed and basically winds all this yarn onto something called a warp beam. So that's stage 1. This thing would spit out several warp beams a day. These warp beams are then fed basically into the second stage, which is called weaving. And here are these warp beams. These things rotate round. And this shuttle goes back and forwards very fast and puts the cross thread. So that's the weft. So all fabric has a warp and a weft thread. And once you put both of those through, coming out the far end of this machine is the fabric. So reams of fabric come out very fast.